The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo. Chapter 19. The days passed. The sun rose and set again and again. Sometimes the father came home and sometimes he did not. Edward's ears became soggy and he did not care. His sweater had almost completely unraveled and it didn't bother him. He was hugged half to death and it felt good. In the evenings, at the hands of Bryce, at the ends of the twine, Edward danced and danced. Okay, time out before we go too far. There's a lot in that first paragraph about how Edward has changed. I want you to look at all the things that he would not have been like a couple chapters back. Look at that. Can you see it? You can point at the screen where you see a line that's completely different from what he used to do. Yep, that's one. Time in. 1 month passed, and then 2, and then 3. Sarah Ruth got worse. In the 5th month, she refused to eat. And in the 6th month, she began to cough up blood. Her breathing became ragged and uncertain, as if she was trying to remember in between breaths what to do, what breathing was. "Breathe, honey," Bryce stood over her and said. "Breathe," thought Edward from deep inside the well of her arms. "Please, please breathe." Bryce stopped leaving the house. He sat at home all day and held Sarah Ruth in his lap and rocked her back and forth and sang to her on a bright morning in September. Sarah Ruth stopped breathing. "Oh no," said Bryce. "Oh, honey, take a little breath, please." Edward had fallen out of Sarah Ruth's arms the night before, and she had not asked for him again. So, face down on the floor, arms over his head, Edward listened as Bryce wept. He listened as the father came home and shouted at Bryce. He listened as the father wept. "You can't cry," Bryce shouted. "You got no right to cry. You never even loved her. You don't know nothing about love." "I loved her," said the father. "I loved her." "I loved her too," thought Edward. "I loved her, and now she is gone. How could this be?" he wondered. How could he bear to live in a world without Sarah Ruth? The yelling between the father and son continued, and then there was a terrible moment when the father insisted that Sarah Ruth belonged to him, that she was his girl, his baby, and that he was taking her to be buried. "She ain't yours," Bryce screamed. "You can't take her. She ain't yours." But the father was bigger and stronger, and he prevailed. He wrapped Sarah Ruth in a blanket and carried her away. The small house became very quiet. Edward could hear Bryce moving around, muttering to himself. And then, finally, the boy picked Edward up. "Come on, Jangles," Bryce said. "We're leaving. We're going to Memphis." Woof. Oh, man. That's hard. Before we move on, let's time out there. There's a lot between Bryce and the father. And I just want to go back to it here. I wonder what you think about this. Father starts crying, and then Bryce says this. "You can't cry," Bryce shouted. "You got no right to cry. You never even loved her. You don't know nothing about love." "I loved her," said the father. "I loved her." Is that true? Is it possible to love somebody like the father loves Sarah Ruth and not really show it? Why does Bryce say that he can't cry and that he's got no right to cry? Bryce says later that she ain't yours, that you can't take her. She ain't yours. Why does Bryce feel this way? about Sarah Ruth. Love can be pretty powerful stuff. And sometimes when you love somebody, there's a sense of belonging that you have, like something belongs to you, someone belongs to you. So when you're thinking about love here, because in the end, I think Edward is going to be dealing with those feelings of love, as we see here. I loved her too. It's complicated. Love will hurt if you experience this loss like they have. And now Edward is feeling some real loss. Let's see what happens when they go to Memphis. Chapter 20. How many dancing rabbits have you seen in your life? Bryce said to Edward. I can tell you how many I've seen. One. You. That's how you and me are going to make some money. I seen it the last time I was in Memphis. Folks put on any kind of show right there on the street corner and people pay them for it. I seen it. The walk to town took all night. Bryce walked without stopping, carrying Edward under one arm and talking to him the whole time. Edward tried to listen, but the terrible scarecrow feeling had come back, the feeling he had when he was hanging by his ears in the old lady's garden, the feeling that nothing mattered and that nothing would ever matter again. And not only did Edward feel hollow, he ached. Every part of his china body hurt. He ached for Sarah Ruth. He wanted her to hold him. He wanted to dance for her. And he did dance, but it was not for Sarah Ruth. Edward danced for strangers on a dirty street corner in Memphis. Bryce played his harmonica and moved Edward's strings, and Edward bowed and shuffled and swayed, and people stopped to stare and point and laugh. On the ground in front of them was Sarah Ruth's button box. The lid was open to encourage people to drop change inside it. Mama, said a small child, look at that bunny. I want to touch him. He reached out his hand for Edward. No, said the mother, dirty. She pulled the child back away from Edward. Nasty, she said. A man wearing a hat stopped and stared at Edward and Bryce. It's a sin to dance, he said. And then, after a long pause, he said, it's a particular sin for rabbits to dance. The man took off his hat and held it over his heart. He stood and watched the boy and the rabbit for a long time. Finally, he put his hat back on his head and walked away. The shadows lengthened. The sun became an orange, dusty ball low in the sky. Bryce started to cry. Edward saw his tears land on the pavement. But the boy did not stop playing his harmonica. He did not make Edward stop dancing. An old woman leaning on a cane stepped up close to them. She stared at Edward with deep, dark eyes. Pellegrina? Thought the dancing rabbit. She nodded at him. Look at me, he said to her. His arms and legs jerked. Look at me. You got your wish. I have learned how to love. And it's a terrible thing. I'm broken. My heart is broken. Help me. The old woman turned and hobbled away. Come back, thought Edward. Fix me. Bryce cried harder. He made Edward dance faster. Finally, when the sun was gone and the streets were dark, Bryce stopped playing his harmonica. I'm done now, he said. He let Edward fall to the pavement. I ain't gonna cry anymore. Bryce wiped his nose and his eyes with the back of his hand. He picked up the button box and looked inside it. We got us enough money to get something to eat, he said. Come on, Jangles. Wow. Time out again. Let's look at this. This old woman. Is she really Pellegrina? I wonder. What do you think? Kate DiCamillo doesn't let us know for sure. She does nod at him, but maybe it's just what he thinks. Is it really Pellegrina? That would be really unusual if it was. But more importantly, look at what he says to her, if it really is her. He says, "Look at me. You got your wish. I have learned how to love, and it's a terrible thing. I'm broken. My heart is broken. Help me." Why does Edward think that love is a terrible thing? And how does he want to be fixed? What could Pellegrina do if it really was Pellegrina do? If it really is Pellegrina, what could she do that would fix him so that he would no longer be broken again? It's an interesting thing to think about how love has sort of turned for him. Again, that's the thing that I think you should be reflecting on in your read and response journal. Why does Edward think that love is a terrible thing? Let's move on. Chapter 21. The diner was called Neil's. The word was written in big red neon letters that flashed on and off. Inside it was warm and bright and smelled like fried chicken and toast and coffee. Bryce sat at the counter and put Edward on a stool next to him. He leaned the rabbit's forehead up against the counter so that he would not fall. "What you gonna have, sugar?" the waitress said to Bryce. "Give me some pancakes," said Bryce. "And some eggs, and I want some steak, too. I want a big old steak. And some toast. And some coffee." The waitress leaned forward and pulled at one of Edward's ears, and then pushed him backwards so that she could see his face. "This your rabbit?" she said to Bryce. "Yes'm. He's mine now. He belonged to my sister." Bryce wiped at his nose with the back of his hand. "We're in show business, me and him." "Is that right?" said the waitress. She had a name tag on the front of her dress. Marlene, it said. She looked at Edward's face, and then she let go of his ear, and he fell forward so that his head rested against the counter again. "Go ahead, Marlene," thought Edward. "Push me around. Do with me as you will. What does it matter? I am broken. Broken." The food came, and Bryce ate all of it, without even looking up from his plate. "Well, you was hungry for sure," said Marlene as she cleared away the plates. "I reckon show business is hard work." "Yes'm," said Bryce. Marlene tucked the check under the coffee cup. Bryce picked it up and looked at it, and then shook his head. "I ain't got enough," he said to Edward. "Ma'am," he said to Marlene when she came back and filled up his coffee cup. "I ain't got enough." "What, sugar?" "I ain't got enough money." She stopped pouring the coffee and looked at him. "You're going to have to talk to Neil about that." Neil, it turned out, was both the owner and the cook. He was a large, red-haired, red-faced man who came out of the kitchen holding a spatula in one hand. "You came in here hungry, right?" he said to Bryce. "Yes, sir," said Bryce. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "And you ordered some food, and I cooked it, and Marlene brought it to you, right?" "I reckon," said Bryce. "You reckon?" said Neil. He brought the spatula down on the countertop with a thwack. Bryce jumped. "Yes, sir. No, sir." "I cooked it for you," said Neil. "Yes, sir," said Bryce. He picked Edward up off the stool and held him close. Everyone in the diner had stopped eating. They were all staring at the boy and the rabbit and Neil. Only Marlene looked away. "You ordered it. I cooked it. Marlene served it. You ate it. Now," said Neil, "I want my money." He tapped the spatula lightly on the counter. Bryce cleared his throat. "You ever seen a rabbit dance?" he said. "How's that?" said Neil. "You ever before in your life seen a rabbit dance?" Bryce set Edward on the floor and started pulling the strings attached to his feet, making him do a slow shuffle. He put his harmonica in his mouth and played a sad song that went along with the dance. Somebody laughed. Bryce took the harmonica out of his mouth and said, "He could dance some more if you wanted to. He could dance to pay for what I ate. Neil stared at Bryce. And then, without warning, he reached down and grabbed hold of Edward. This is what I think of dancing rabbits, said Neil. And he swung Edward by the feet, swung him so that his head hit the edge of the counter hard. There was a loud crack. Bryce screamed. And the world, Edward's world, went black.